All right, today on The Explainer, we are digging into the past to uncover some of history's most extreme rituals. We're talking about ancient sacrifices of blood and fire. Our source material kicks things off with this really chilling question. It's asking us to imagine that the real stories from inside ancient temples, well, they could be more terrifying than any horror movie you've ever seen. But this isn't about ghost stories or make-believe. We're stepping past the what if and looking directly at the historical record, at what archaeologists and historians have actually found. So let's get into it and start peeling back the layers on some of history's darkest secrets. These are practices that stretched across totally different cultures and continents. And this is a really important distinction to make right up front. We are not talking about myths here. The rituals we're about to explore, as unsettling as they are, they're part of our documented human history, backed up by real evidence. Our first case study takes us to the ancient and powerful civilization of Carthage in North Africa, where the offering was one of pure innocence. The Carthaginian ritual was, well, terrifyingly simple. It started with parents bringing their own newborns to the altar. From there, the infants were placed on sacred stones and finally consumed by fire. The source material uses that exact phrasing, and wow, it leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. It's just a brutal reminder of how a powerful belief system can drive people to make the most unthinkable sacrifice. Okay, so from North Africa, let's jump across the Atlantic to the Aztec Empire. We've got a totally different culture, a different pantheon of gods, but a form of ritual sacrifice that was just as intense. The Aztec ritual wasn't some quiet, hidden thing. No, this was a massive public spectacle tied directly to the sun and the sky. Victims, who are often captured in battle, were led to the top of these huge pyramids. And there, a priest would open the victim's chest and offer their still-beating heart to the gods. You see, for the Aztecs, this wasn't just violence. It was a cosmic necessity. They believed that blood was a kind of life-giving rain that was absolutely essential to make sure the sun would rise the next day. It was literally a debt of blood, paid to keep the entire universe in balance. For our third and final example, we're going to travel to the Indian subcontinent. Here, we'll look at a ritual known as sati, a practice that's all about marital devotion and honor. So what exactly was sati? It was a funeral rite, and it centered on what was seen as the ultimate act of devotion for a wife. A widow joining her deceased husband on his funeral pyre. So the sati, of course, always started with the husband's death. But the next step, at least as the tradition saw it, was the widow making her own vow to prove her devotion. And the final, terrible act was to ascend that pyre and be cremated right alongside him. The ideal that was presented inside the culture was one of willingly ascending. The entire belief was centered on this idea of a devotion so absolute, so powerful, that it was believed to actually transcend death itself. Okay, so we've looked at three very different rituals from three completely separate parts of the globe. Now, let's kind of pull back the camera and see if we can spot the unseen pattern that connects all of this. When you lay it all out side by side like this, the pattern really starts to jump out at you. In Carthage, newborns were sacrificed to appease the gods. For the Aztecs, captives were offered up to keep the cosmos going. And in India, widows died to prove their devotion. You see, the victims were different, the reasons were different, but that core idea of ritual death as the answer was shockingly similar. Just think about that for a second. Three incredibly different civilizations separated by thousands of miles and, in some cases, hundreds of years. And yet each one, in its own way, was driven by belief to the very same extreme conclusion. What this really shows us is that these were not random acts of violence. They were extreme for sure, but they were also highly ritualized. They were accepted by their societies, and they were deeply, deeply rooted in a specific way of seeing the world. Each one of these acts made a kind of terrifying sense inside its own cultural logic. And here is a fascinating little cliffhanger from the source material. What we've just talked about today, it's only the beginning. It suggests the history of these practices is way deeper and more common than we might even think. And that leaves us with this one last really big question to chew on. If belief can lead to this, what other incredible, shocking, or even inspiring extremes has it driven people to throughout all of history? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.